Right, so get this. We're diving into Chris Butler and the Science of Identity Foundation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we've got a ton of stuff to look at here.
Okay.
Like we've got books, forum discussions, articles, even social media posts.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And get this, we're even looking at this multi-level marketing company called QNet. It's going to all make sense, though.
Okay.
Connections. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, we're trying to figure out if the Science of Identity Foundation is a real spiritual path or if there's something more to it.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see how these pieces fit together.
Okay, cool. So let's start with Chris Butler himself.
Okay.
One thing that really jumped out at me was his journey from a simple life to like a life of luxury.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're talking fancy apartments, personal chefs.
Yeah.
Not really what you think of when you picture a spiritual leader,
Right.
who's supposed to have renounced all these worldly possessions.
Yeah, it definitely makes you wonder about how sincere he is about these principles, especially in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, which is what he's associated with.
Wow.
Renunciation is a really big deal there.
Oh, yeah. And then there's his followers.
Okay.
They are so devoted. Like we're talking kissing his feet devoted.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
There are even stories about them consuming his toenail clippings.
Toenail clippings, like
Yeah.
eating them.
Yeah, as Mahaprasad.
That's a bit much, isn't it?
I know, right.
Like, it's one thing to respect your teacher,
Right.
but that just seems like it crosses a line into
Yeah.
idol worship.
It's giving major cult of personality vibes.
Yeah.
Speaking of red flags,
Okay.
there's this story about Butler throwing air purifiers off of a plane
Where
because they took up too much space.
they're purifiers.
And then he complains about the air quality
Oh my God.
on the plane.
Wow. So this guy's surrounded by luxury,
I know.
and then he's throwing a fit over air purifier.
I know. It's like,
That's really add up.
no, it's like he wants to have his cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get to the controversies surrounding Butler and Sif.
Okay.
I know he hasn't been charged with any crimes.
Right.
But there are a lot of serious allegations out there.
There are, and it's important to approach them carefully.
Of course.
We're not here to judge,
No.
but we do need to take these claims seriously
Absolutely.
and see if they fit with what else we know.
Okay, so one of the big accusations is about financial impropriety.
Yeah.
Specifically, that Butler was using donations meant for the organization
Right.
for his own personal expenses.
If that's true, that's a huge breach of trust.
Right.
People donate to spiritual organizations believing that money is going to a good cause,
Right. It's just wrong.
not to line someone's pockets.
And then there are the claims about mistreatment of followers. There are accounts of him verbally abusing people,
Oh, wow.
like calling Yamuni Andrews a fucking bitch
Yeah.
and telling Damodar Das to fuck off.
That's completely unacceptable, especially from someone in a position of spiritual leadership.
Right.
It goes against everything that most spiritual traditions emphasize,
Yeah, totally.
like compassion and respect.
There's another story that's kind of strange.
Okay.
Apparently, a follower named Bhagranga Das was forbidden from remarrying after his divorce, which on its own is already kind of controlling.
Yeah.
But then you find out that other members of Butler's family,
Right.
who were also part of SIF,
Yeah.
didn't have the same restrictions.
So there's like a double standard.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Different rules for him and his inner circle
Exactly.
than everyone else.
Okay, so we've seen these concerning behaviors.
Yeah.
But to really understand what's going on, we need to look at the spiritual tradition that Butler claims to represent.
Okay, so the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition.
Right.
It's a branch of Hinduism with specific guidelines for renunciates,
Right.
people who give up worldly things
Yeah.
to focus on spirituality. And Butler claimed to be this kind of renunciate. He even took on the title Paramahamsa.
But then he went and married a disciple and continued to live this lavish lifestyle.
Yeah, it doesn't sound very renunciate-like.
It doesn't.
It really doesn't.
It makes you wonder,
Yeah.
can you really renounce the world while enjoying all of the perks of wealth and marriage?
Is this a case of saying one thing and doing another?
Yeah, it's definitely a head scratcher.
Definitely.
Okay, so we're starting to see a pattern here, right?
Yep. Yeah.
This luxurious lifestyle, the devoted followers,
Yeah.
the questionable financial dealings,
Right.
the allegations of abuse, and now this tension between his actions and the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition.
It's like a puzzle.
Yeah.
Where all the pieces are starting to fit together,
Right.
and they're painting a pretty unsettling picture.
And this is where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
We're going to delve into the world of cults and try to understand if what we're seeing with Sif aligns with those dynamics.
Okay, so this is getting intense.
It is!
Wow, I'm fascinated to hear more. Welcome back.
Yeah, so last time we were starting to unpack some potentially concerning aspects of the Science of Identity Foundation.
Right, like all those red flags we talked about Chris Butler's lifestyle,
Mhm.
the way his followers treat him.
It's definitely making me wonder if Sif might have some cult-like tendencies.
Yeah.
So let's dig into that.
Okay.
What are some of the things that experts look for when trying to identify a cult?
Well, one of the biggest red flags is the elevation of a leader to an almost godlike status.
Okay.
And we definitely see signs of that with Butler.
You're talking about the whole toenail clippings as Mahaprasad thing, right?
Exactly. And it's not just that. There's this
Yeah.
whole culture of unquestioning adoration surrounding him.
Oh, boy.
People kissing his feet, treating his every word as gospel.
Yeah.
That kind of devotion
Mm-hmm.
can make people vulnerable to manipulation because they stop thinking critically
Yeah.
and just accept whatever the leader says.
It's like they surrender their own judgment.
Yeah, it's scary.
It is scary.
Another classic cult tactic is creating an us versus them mentality.
Okay.
They make members feel like they're special,
Right.
part of an elite group,
Uh-huh.
and that everyone outside the group is ignorant or even dangerous.
Oh, wow. And I'm guessing we see this in Sif, too.
There are definitely signs of it.
Like what?
Former members have talked about being pressured to cut ties
Oh, wow.
with family and friends who weren't part of SIF.
Okay.
They were told that outsiders were demonic or trying to steal their souls.
Wow. So they're really isolated.
Exactly. And that isolation
Yeah.
makes it even harder for people to leave
Right.
because they're afraid of losing their whole support system.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned that cults often use guilt and shame to control people.
Right.
What does that look like in practice?
They'll constantly tell members they're not doing enough, that they're falling short spiritually,
Right.
and that the only way to redeem themselves is to give more
Okay.
time, energy, or money to the group.
This pressure to donate.
Yeah.
It's something you see in other manipulative groups, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Like that multi-level marketing company we talked about, QNF.
Exactly. They both use those tactics
Yeah.
to get people to give more than they can afford.
And when it comes from a spiritual leader,
Right?
it's even more powerful because people believe they're jeopardizing their spiritual well-being if they don't comply.
It's a very insidious form of control.
So we've got the leader, worship, the isolation, the guilt tripping.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other cult warning signs we should be aware of?
One that really stands out is the way cults tend to simplify complex spiritual teachings.
Okay.
They reduce everything to a set of rigid rules and doctrines.
Interesting.
It becomes all about doing the right things outwardly,
Okay.
not about genuine interchange.
It's like they're stuck on the rituals and rules.
Yeah.
Without understanding the deeper meaning behind them.
Exactly.
It makes me think about how Butler claimed to be a renunciate,
Right.
but his actions didn't really match up
In it all.
with the true spirit of renunciation in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
True renunciation is about letting go of attachment to worldly things.
Right.
It's an inner transformation, not just a set of external behaviors.
And that kind of nuance is often lost in cults,
Yeah.
where blind obedience is valued over true understanding.
Exactly.
It sounds like they're trying to control how people think,
Yeah,
not just how they act.
absolutely.
Wow.
They might discourage critical thinking, ban certain books or teachings,
Okay.
or even rewrite history to fit their own narrative.
It's all about maintaining power
Yeah,
and keeping members from questioning their authority.
exactly.
Okay, so we've looked at these cult warning signs,
Right.
and honestly, it's starting to feel like a lot of them apply to Sif. But ultimately, isn't it up to each individual to decide what they believe?
You're right. It's not our place to judge anyone's spiritual beliefs.
Yeah. Who are we to say?
Right.
What's a legitimate spiritual path and what isn't?
But I think it's important to be aware of these dynamics
Okay.
so people can make informed choices.
Right.
Cults can be incredibly damaging,
Yeah.
and we need to be able to recognize the signs and protect ourselves and others from harm.
So what can someone do if they think they might be involved in a group that's exhibiting these red flags?
The first step is to educate themselves.
Okay.
There are tons of resources out there about cults and how they operate.
Mm-hmm.
Reading accounts from former members can be really eye-opening.
It's like having a map that helps you see the territory more clearly.
Exactly. And it's also crucial to find someone they trust to talk to.
Okay.
A friend, a family member, a therapist,
Yeah.
maybe even a support group for former cult members.
Okay.
Just knowing they're not alone can make a huge difference.
And if someone decides they want to leave a group,
Right.
what advice would you give them?
Leaving a cult can be really tough, both emotionally and practically.
Right.
It's important to have a good support system in place
Okay.
and to take things one step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
There are also organizations that specialize in helping people exit cults safely
Oh,
and
right.
rebuild their lives.
It's good to know that there are resources out there.
Absolutely. And it's important to emphasize that leaving a cult is not a sign of weakness.
Right.
It takes a lot of courage to break free from that kind of control and reclaim your autonomy.
Okay, so we've talked about all these cult dynamics,
Right.
but let's bring this back to Chris Butler and Sif.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on his teachings?
Well, Butler draws on the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, which is a rich and complex spiritual path.
Right.
But as we've discussed, his interpretation of those teachings seems to be pretty selective.
Yeah.
And often contradicts the core principles.
So he's kind of picking and choosing what suits him
It seems that way.
and ignoring the parts that don't.
Exactly. And that's something to be wary of with any spiritual teacher.
Right.
Do they encourage you to think critically, explore different perspectives, or do they demand blind obedience and shut down any questioning?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
And it leads me to my next question.
Okay.
We've seen how Butler's personal life and the practices within Sif raise some serious concerns.
Right.
But what about his influence on the outside world? Specifically, his connection to Tulsi Gabbard.
That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Gabbard, a former U.S. representative and presidential candidate, has been open about her lifelong connection to Sif
Right.
and her relationship with Chris Butler as her guru.
And that's raised a lot of eyebrows, right?
It has.
Especially when you consider that her political campaigns received a significant amount of funding from Sif members,
Yeah.
many of whom had never donated to political campaigns before.
It does make you wonder if those donations were truly voluntary or influenced by Butler's endorsement.
It blurs the lines between spiritual devotion and political choice,
Yeah.
which can be dangerous.
It can.
So we're talking about potential undue influence in the political sphere.
Exactly. And it raises questions about, are people supporting her because they genuinely believe in her policies?
Right.
Or are they just following their guru's lead?
Yeah, it's a tricky situation.
It is.
On the one hand, people of faith have every right to be politically active.
Of course.
And to let their values guide their choices.
Right.
But on the other hand, when you have a leader with as much authority as Butler seems to have, it's easy for that line to get crossed.
I agree. It's a delicate balance.
It is.
And in this case, given everything we've learned about Butler and Sif, it's understandable why people are concerned about the potential for undue influence.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about Chris Butler's extravagant lifestyle, the concerning allegations against him and Sif,
right,
the potential cult-like dynamics within the organization, and his influence on Tulsi Gabbard's political career.
It's a lot.
What's the big takeaway for our listeners?
I think the most important thing is to remember that critical thinking is crucial.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to things like spirituality and personal growth.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get swept up in a charismatic leader's message.
Right.
Or the promises of a group. But it's crucial to maintain a healthy level of skepticism.
Don't just hand over your critical thinking skills at the door.
Exactly. Ask questions, do your research, talk to different people, and most importantly, trust your gut.
Yeah.
Something feels wrong, it probably is.
And that applies to all areas of life, right?
Absolutely.
Not just spiritual groups.
We need to be discerning in our relationships, our work, even our consumption of information online.
Right.
We're bombarded with so much information these days.
Yeah, we are.
And it's easy to get sucked into echo chambers or to fall for manipulative tactics. It's true.
But the more we understand about how these things work,
right,
the better equipped we are to protect ourselves.
Knowledge is power.
It really is. And another key takeaway from this deep dive is that cults and manipulative groups don't always fit a neat little stereotype.
Right.
They can exist in all sorts of forms.
Interesting.
From fringe religious groups to seemingly mainstream organizations. The key is to recognize the underlying patterns of control and exploitation. Regardless of the specific context.
So it's about being aware of those red flags.
Yes.
The excessive devotion to a leader, the isolation from outside perspectives, the pressure to conform, the financial manipulation.
Exactly.
Okay, and one final thought.
Yeah.
Even though we've uncovered some disturbing things about Chris Butler and the Science of Identity Foundation, it's important to remember that not everyone involved in the group is necessarily a victim.
Right.
Or a perpetrator.
There are people who have found meaning and community within SAF.
Right.
And that's valid. It's not about judging individuals.
Right.
It's about understanding the dynamics at play.
Exactly. Our goal here isn't to condemn anyone, but to shed light on the potential for harm and to empower people to make informed choices about their spiritual paths and their relationships.
Well said. So to wrap things up, I think the big question we're left with is this. How can we cultivate genuine spiritual growth and connection while also staying grounded in critical thinking and self-awareness?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And I don't think there's a simple answer.
No.
But I do believe that it starts with being honest with ourselves, with questioning our assumptions, and with being willing to look at things from multiple perspectives.
It's a lifelong journey for sure.
It is.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive into the world of Chris Butler and the Science of Identity Foundation.
It has been.
I want to thank you for sharing your insights.
You're welcome.
And for helping us navigate this complex and at times unsettling topic.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey.
Yes, thank you.
Remember, stay curious, stay informed.
Stay true to yourselves.
And we'll see you next time. We've been exploring this fascinating and at times unsettling world of Chris Butler and the Science of Identity Foundation.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey.
It has. We've seen how he went from this simple life to one of luxury, how his followers seem to almost worship him.
Right.
And those toenail clippings, how they play into this larger narrative.
It's a lot.
It is.
We've uncovered these potential cult-like elements within Sif, and then the whole Tulsi Gabbard connection.
Right, which raises some serious concerns about the intersection of spirituality and politics.
Yeah.
So as we wrap things up, I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
what are some of the key takeaways our listeners should keep in mind?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is that we need to be critical thinkers, especially when it comes to things like spirituality and personal growth.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get swept up in a charismatic leader's message,
Right.
the promises of a group, but it's so crucial to maintain a healthy level of skepticism.
Don't just hand over your critical thinking skills at the door.
Exactly. Ask questions, do your research, talk to different people, and most importantly, trust your gut.
Okay.
If something feels wrong, it probably is.
And that applies to all areas of life.
Right? Absolutely.
Not just spiritual groups.
No. We need to be discerning in our relationships, in our work.
Right.
Even our consumption of information online.
Right. We're bombarded with so much information these days.
We are. It's easy to get sucked into echo chambers or to fall for manipulative tactics.
It's true.
But the more we understand about how these things work, the better equipped we are to protect ourselves.
Knowledge is power.
It really is. And another key takeaway from this deep dive is that cults and manipulative groups don't always fit a neat little stereotype.
Right.
They can exist in all sorts of forms, from fringe religious groups to seemingly mainstream organizations.
That's interesting.
Yeah. The key is to recognize the underlying patterns of control and exploitation, regardless of the specific context.
So it's about being aware of those red flags.
Right.
The excessive devotion to a leader, the isolation from outside perspectives, the pressure to conform, the financial manipulation.
Exactly.
Okay, and one final thought.
Yeah.
Even though we've uncovered some disturbing things about Chris Butler and the Science of Identity Foundation, it's important to remember that not everyone involved in the group is necessarily a victim or a perpetrator.
You're absolutely right.
Right.
There are people who have found meaning and community within SAF.
Right. And we're not here to judge their experiences.
We're just trying to understand the dynamics at play.
Right.
Our goal here isn't to condemn anyone. It's to shed light on the potential for harm and to empower people to make informed choices about their spiritual paths and their relationships.
So to wrap things up, I think the big question we're left with is this. How can we cultivate genuine spiritual growth and connection while also staying grounded in critical thinking and self-awareness?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And I don't think there's any easy answer.
No.
But I do believe that it starts with being honest with ourselves.
Okay.
Questioning our assumptions.
Yeah.
And being willing to look at things from multiple perspectives.
It's a lifelong journey, for sure.
It really is.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive into the world of Chris Butler and the Science of Identity Foundation.
It has.
I want to thank you for sharing your insights and for helping us navigate this complex and at times unsettling topic.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey.
Yes, thank you so much for listening.
Remember, stay curious, stay informed, and stay true to yourselves.
And we'll see you next time.